All right, so at this point you're probably on like part 2 or 3 of this video, depending on how I broke it up, and I'd like to apologize for that. Bunch of different issues relating to how much space I have on my phone, how Google Photos doesn't work well with YouTube, how YouTube doesn't have a video editor anymore, how I don't have a good video editor for Windows 10. I typically just do this stuff straight on my phone, but making a long video like this ran into some problems I haven't had before, so sorry to break it up into several parts. Whatever part you're on now, whatever we're doing, it's not whatever we're doing. What we're doing now is we're going to get this dent out, right? Where this post has been pushed in a little bit and also pushed that way. So we're going to get this out, and then we're going to get, in a separate way, different way, we're going to push this post back out and this post foot, or this keyguard foot back out. But right now, we're just going to push this out. And this rib will make this a little bit harder than usual, but I think we can still, if we focus our energy in the right spot with this dent ball, we can still push this out just using hand force without any unsoldering or anything super fancy. So I've got it located right under what feels like the high spot, and the first thing I'm going to do is just push straight down. Wow, that was a really loud Windows notification in the background. Okay, so that actually popped like right out. I'm just going to do like a tiny bit. I can feel on the inside a tiny bit of high spot there. Okay, that's that. Now let's try and get the dents out of right here, underneath that foot, and also underneath this post here. And the way I'm going to get to this is by going through the E-flat tone hole. And this is a non-removable key guard, at least without unsoldering it. So I've got to go through the tone hole, and first thing I'm going to do is try and straighten this out. There's a little bit of a dent right here. It's kind of got pushed in that way, it looks like. So make sure you're not hitting any of the edges of the tone hole. Kind of rotate the horn around till you can get the angle that you want. Make sure I'm feeling what I need to feel. I think I'm pretty much right there, but let's check with a magnet. Yep. Okay. So I want to make sure that when I apply pressure here that I am not going to get anywhere near the tone hole. And I'm steadying the bell with my hip to give myself a little bit more free energy in my hands to apply the pressure the direction I want versus holding the horn up. I'm just trying to apply some force right up this direction. I got some, but not as much as I wanted. I think I'm going to try to do this guy a bit before I go back to here, because I feel like this metal being pulled this way, it might be making this a little bit harder for me to do. Could be wrong, but it won't mess it up if I try and do it first. So what I'm going to do now is called rebounding, where I'm going to put this on the dent where I want it, and then I'm going to take a hammer. This is my grandfather's hammer. I've only replaced the head once and the shaft twice. And I'm going to hit this while applying pressure, and that'll give a sharp strike upwards as this deflects down and then comes back up. Now where you hit it and how hard you hit it has a big impact on how much this moves. Now typically you'd want a helper doing this with you, but since I live in the woods in the middle of nowhere, and I only have a helper here a day or two a week, I've learned to do this on my own. But this is not what I would recommend. So I'm going to go back through the tone hole here, and especially with rebounding you've got to be really careful. And this is actually about as difficult as it gets. This particular direction with a minimal amount of room and a large deflection underneath this. This is going to be difficult to do, and I am pretty nervous, so you might see my hand shaking a little bit like they did in the video where I was taking dents out of a mouthpiece with heat. So, alright, let's get my dent ball where I want it and get my hammer out. Okay, now the way this happens, this cage got hit. So it got pushed down pretty much right here, right? So the force didn't happen here, the force happened here. So I'm going to put my dent ball under where the force initially happened and hope that if I hit it back outwards and around the same direction, that this will pop out to where it wants to be. And remember, I've got to give myself plenty of room around this dent hole. So I'd love to push like directly that way, but I have to give it a little bit of a tilt to keep it away from the edges of the tone hole. Okay, let's try one to start off with. Okay, it moved a bit, not a ton. Let's try again. Move it a little more. And again. I'm going to take a quick look at this. See how it's moved. That's looking pretty good. I see a lot of improvement there. I'm liking the direction it's going. It doesn't look like it's causing anything else terrible to happen. So I am going to go ahead and get back on that. Now I'm getting out from underneath the post foot, coming over a little this way, which means I'm going to use a little bit lighter pressure because not being underneath that post foot don't have quite so much total thickness of metal, so I want to be more gentle. I want just a little bit of movement, like right here. Oops. Got stuck in my pocket. Okay. That looks pretty darn good, I think. Let's move it out of the way here and take a look together. Yeah, it didn't come unsoldered. Looks a lot straighter. I feel like it's still pushed a little bit here. So let's do one more underneath the post foot. And hopefully I'm making this look like it's kind of a foregone conclusion. Oops, where did I put my hammer? But again, this is very easy to screw up. Rebounding in particular, going through a tone hole like this, doing it by myself. I mean, this is something that makes me nervous every time I have to do this. Okay, I think I like how that looks. Let's take a look. Okie dokie. Now we're going to try and straighten this out a bit more. I'm going to go back to hammering it like we did earlier, but first I'm going to see if I can adjust some of this by hand. Now I really think this guy's going to pop off at some point, but I kind of want that like to go straight. Let me see if I've got another parallel plier and I can try and concentrate the force on that bend versus anything above or below it. Yeah, this is like slowly peeling back. This is going to come off. I know it. But you know, if I can keep it in place and get this really straight and then it pops off, that's better than having it pop off in the beginning, because if I can kind of use these 3 points of contact to get this, the straighter I can get it while they're still connected, means the closer I am to original shape, right? So if I can get this really close and then this pops off, I might be able to just bend this out a little bit, clean up the solder, bend it back down, leaving these two in place, and just solder this back on. We'll see. This one has a little bit of separation in it. This one doesn't have any, oddly, but this one has a good bit. So, yeah. Yeah, this one's kind of tough. There's a little bit of a bend here. I'm wondering if I can get it like a little straighter than it was before. But I think it's just going to be applying pressure here and pop it off. So let's try and hammer it like we did before, using this as a support right here to keep it from coming off. Maybe to keep it from coming off while I hammer this downwards. Getting a little better. You can see the peel here. It's closer than I thought I'd get. This bottom part's actually still attached, so maybe if I can push that back in, straighten these out, maybe I can avoid having this be completely resoldered and just kind of like try and get that bent back inwards. So I'm going to do a bit more pliers stuff to this off camera. Now you'll notice I'm doing a lot of stuff off camera. It's basically because like you get 90% of the way there with this stuff pretty fast. It's the last bit that takes a long time, and I'm sure you guys can get the gist of what I'm doing in 5 minutes and not have to watch the next 30 minutes of just like tiny little changes. So a bit more rebounding, tiny bit of rebounding here, a little bit here, some more here, a little bit here, straightening this out a bit more, hammering this down a little bit with a wooden dowel, and we've got what looks a lot better than I think most people would have expected from our starting point. And it didn't even separate all the way. You can see there's a little bit of separation here. I'm hoping that I can just clean that out and reflow some solder, and then it won't be super evident that that got resoldered. So the next thing is I accidentally hit the edge of this tone hole a tiny bit. Can you guys see that? Yeah, it looks like you can see it. With the dent rod. And there is a tiny bit of out of roundness here. Now, this is the kind of thing that, let's see, can I zoom in closer? There it is. Now this is the kind of thing that, you know, would have made me absolutely just shit my pants when I first started this job, but I can fix this up real quick. And hopefully this will look really easy, but best thing to do is to avoid this on the front end, so bad mat for doing this. But I barely hit it, and there's just a tiny bit right here. You can see the dent ball laid across that way. and I'm going to push that back. Let's see, can you guys see what I'm doing here? Yeah. So I've got this little burnisher, and I'm going to put it right on the edge. Hopefully this turns out, but I have to focus on actually doing the work. Okay, and there we go. Once I got the camera out of the way, I noticed I had a little bit farther to go. So that's where I ended up after just a little bit more work. So here's what's next. You can see the little crack there in the top. And on the other side, where that solder is separated in the top. Now I've done what I think is a decent job of doing some dent work around that. Haven't done this yet, gonna get to this later. Of doing some dent work around that to where, even though it's separated, it's pretty darn close now. So what I want to do is heat that and have that solder flow again. Now it just peeled, right, because we were doing dent work when it happened, so it hasn't had time to get all dirty and nasty inside. So that solder might be clean. I might be able to reheat it and flow it again. Now, of course, when I try and heat right here, the heat's going to travel. It's going to go up this way a bit, but it's also going to come down here. And chances are that I'm not going to be able to keep it from, rather than having this solder reflow exactly like I want, chances are this solder is not going to reflow, and I'm going to keep heating it, expecting it to reflow, but it won't because it's dirty or something. And then this is going to just go sproing and pop right off and break my heart. So the chances of what I'm about to do working are pretty low. I mean, I can help it out with some finesse with how much heat I put, where I put it, how close I got that joint is a big help. I can try and put some something on here to absorb some of the heat to keep it from separating, but this is pretty chancy. And if it goes the way I think it's going to go, I'm going to try and keep from swearing on camera. If it goes well, that'll be kind of amazing. So let's give it a try. All right, prepare to be disappointed. So there's a bit of whiteout I've painted around the edge there of the spot where the solder is still unbroken. And that should keep it from flowing down that way. If it does pop off, it should keep it from getting all over the silver plate. This is some like heat absorbent gel that's super nasty. Hopefully that'll keep it also from gathering enough heat that the solder pops off. Let's see, my flux dispenser, which is always rusting shut. Let's see how it's actually working today. That's a good sign. Okay, so I am going to just apply a tiny bit of flux and let it seep in to the edge there on both sides. Okay. And that's just trying to like break the surface tension to get it to flow into that little crack there. Try and get as much of it as I can to actually flow in there. And then take a Q-tip and wipe off the excess because I don't want it flowing onto the silver if at all possible. That is a difficult thing to stop if that's what's going to happen. The whiteout will help, but I am probably not as good at this as some people. So, got my torch, got it fluxed. I'll see. First thing I'm going to do is try and heat the surrounding metal on the bottom. You can see the flux bubbling a little bit. Okay. think I'm going to use this opportunity to apply a tiny bit more flux. Okay. I feel like a tiny bit of solder wouldn't be a bad thing to have on hand, although I don't know. I'm pretty nervous. I'm pretty doubtful. That's the sound of me hammering out some solder to be a really thin ribbon. It already starts off as a pretty thin ribbon, but this will make it... Where's my camera? There it is. Really thin towards the end. And if it gets to the point where I can see solder moving and I feel like I've got a moment, maybe I'll try and feed a tiny bit of it in. Again, I feel like this is all pretty wishful thinking. Come on, buddy, get sucked in there. Oh my gosh, did it actually just happen? Did we actually just get it? My hands are shaking. A little bit of a blob out one side, but I can clean that. Oh my gosh, I think we got it. It's actually a good seal. Oh, you guys probably can't see that. It's actually like a good seal. Whoa. All the way around. Just with a little bit to clean up on that side. Which I will go ahead and do now. Holy shit. So I polished it up a little bit, cleaned it up a little bit, just to see what it would look like once it was actually clean. And you know, man, I'll take it. I mean, there's the original solder job down there at the bottom, right? And then there's my reflow and cleanup at the top. I think people would be hard pressed to find that. And like I said, you know, look at the bottom there. That's their job, and there's more space and more extra bubbly solder in there than there is in the part I did. So I'm alright with that result. Next up is the bell-to-body brace that got popped off, right? Now these on these old Selmers often come off. This shape actually looks correct to me. So I think it must have been a pretty sharp blow that just caused this to snap without putting a lot of damage into the brace itself. So the problem is that this has been undone for a little while, so I need to clean the solder out from underneath there so I can resolder it. And also I need to realign the bell. Now, when I showed you this earlier, the keywork here had taken a hit that way and it kind of bent a lot of it, so it was out of place. But the low B flat was actually pretty much unscathed. If I can pull it out of the pile here. So here's the low B flat. It's not bent really. So what we're going to do is use this key to kind of sight back in and kind of double check where this bell is supposed to be. Now, when you've got issues like this, you have to kind of use some forensic analysis to figure out where everything's supposed to be before you put it back together. And the two pieces, the two clues I've got is that based on my knowledge of what these bell-to-body braces look like, I don't believe that this one has been damaged very much. And I've also got the undamaged B here, right? So let's take a look at, once this is remounted, we can see it's still straight, still fits between the posts, so it hasn't been damaged too much. So we can take a look at this, and I'll put a leak light in here to help show you guys. And we can see where the B is hitting now. So we can see that it is not closing all the way. So it is hitting in the back. Can you guys see that? Don't look down here. Look down here. I'm trying to get it to focus. You can see that it's hitting in the back first. So what that means is if I pull the bell this way, see how it closes more? Now there's a bit of light escaping right here because this has been pushed down. But if I take this and pull the bell downwards, see how it closes? And lo and behold, that is what happens if I move the bell to pretty much right exactly where that brace used to be, right? So I think if I get this put back to right there, that's going to be where everything's supposed to be. Now the only problem is that I need to, one, get the solder out from underneath here, and I don't want to just like bind this together, press that down, and then solder it when it's under that much pressure. I mean, you see my hand shaking? That's taking a lot of pressure to hold that bell in place, right? So what I'm going to need to do is bend this out of the way. Bend this out of the way. So take this off, bend this out of the way. Just one direction. I'm going to try and bend it this way. So I've got room to clean everything, and then I'm going to have room to realign the bell, because I need to pull the bell. So it's hard to like have you guys see all this. I need to pull the bell this way, relative to the body. And if this is in the way, I won't be able to pull very far. Because with metal, you always have to bend past where you want to go and then come back a little bit, right? Metal has memory. I'm sure you've tried to like bend something. If you bend it exactly where you want and then let go, it'll start to move back. So especially because we're dealing with relatively springy brass and what is kind of, and you can actually see here, this is probably part of it. This bottom piece has been twisted a little bit, and I need to pull pretty hard to twist a tube back into place, so I need room to do that. So this will be kind of dicey. I'm going to need to do a few things well in order to make this work. One, I'm going to need to move this brace well upwards in a way that I can undo later. I'm going to need to clean all that old solder off well. I'm going to need to bend this bell relative to the body well and see if I can get that twist to come out, and that might hopefully help reshape this low C tone hole, which is a little bit off. You can see it's longer this way than it is that way. And that's the reason I haven't attacked this with dent work, because I don't actually see any deformation of the body that's left around here. I think that once this bell moves back to where it's supposed to, this is going to be a lot more round than it is currently, hopefully. But going to have to kind of have a lot of things go my way in order to have this go back together well. And then at the end of it, I have to solder this together in a way that doesn't look sloppy. On these horns, you will always see this is redone so poorly. It's so frustrating. And also, all this was frozen, so I had to actually let this sit in penetrating oil for a little while to get everything apart so that I can even access this. But that's what we're going to do next. So let's get started. So first thing I'm going to do is bend this out of the way. And I'm going to do this with my fingers. I'm going to try and just apply just pressure upwards. Now this is brazed on here. There's a really big foot soft soldered onto the bell. If I hold the bell down and push up on this, it should just bend this wire. And if I apply pressure in only one direction, then hopefully I can apply opposite pressure in only the other direction and have it come back to where it was. I don't want to mess with this arc. I just want this up and out of the way. I don't want to touch on the end here because it's just going to bend that part back. I kind of want to touch right here. So I think my hands are going to get in the way here, but there's really not much that I can do about that because I just need to kind of pull on this in a way that works the way I need it to. Ouch. Okay, so I've gotten that out of there a good bit. It still seems to have the same relative position that it had before, where it's a little bit down. So I don't think I've adjusted the angle this way any. So now I'm going to clean the solder out here, and then I'm going to try and twist the body back. Show you a bit of the solder cleanup. I'm going to use mostly one of my favorite tools, this little push scraper. And this is fairly, you know, boring stuff to watch, but I'll give you the idea of what I'm doing. And let's see if, maybe if I can zoom in a little bit. Keep that in your view just so you can see. Is that something you guys will be able to see? Looks like it. Start right at the edge, not on the silver, on the solder. And you just push. And that is what I will do over and over until I get this solder cleaned up.